In January of 2002, Grandmaster Ruslan Ponomariov became the youngest FIDE World Champion in history, earning the title at just 18 years old. Recently, I had the chance to face Pono over the board in a simul organized during the Killer Chess Training Camp held in Roquetas de Mar, Spain. Pono was invited as a special guest to the camp, which took place over the last week. For the simul, there were something like 25 boards, with most players in the range of 16 to 2300. It was actually quite strong for a simul. I was the second highest rated player there, with a grandmaster in the mix as well. Of course, it was quite an honor to meet and play against Pono, who is originally from Ukraine, as he is one of the most accomplished players of the 21st century. So, without any further ado, here's the game. So, the game started e4. I went c5, knight f3, knight c6, and now Pono played bishop to b5, the Rosalimo. And I decided to play d6 here. Of course, black has multiple options, like knight f6, g6, but I thought d6 is a good choice for this game. He castled. I went bishop d7, rook e1, and a6. And now here the main move is to play bishop to f1. And I've had some games like this. Typically, black continues with bishop to g4, eventually gives up the bishop on f3, and it's a very playable position. But instead, white decided to take on c6, which is also very playable. After bishop takes c6, d4, takes, we essentially get an open Sicilian structure where white has already given up the light squared bishop. And in general, white's idea here is to push c4 and try to get a Marazzi bind kind of structure. So I actually had a game in this line recently at the Grinky Open where I played knight f6. And this move is actually a mistake because here white could have played knight takes c6. And after takes queen to f3, this is kind of a nice position for white as they're threatening to go e5. And I have issues with the structure. So in this game, of course, I improved on that game. I played the move rook to c8, which is better. Now knight takes c6 isn't as good because rook takes c6 and black structure is fine. And yeah, I was definitely expecting c4 here, which I believe is the main move. And then black continues g6. We get this Marazzi bind kind of position, and it's, of course, playable for both sides. But instead, Pono went for knight to c3, which I was not familiar with and is kind of a pretty tricky move. Because at first it looks like black can just kind of do whatever. We have like a normal Sicilian. Seems like black should have no issues here. But in fact, white does have ideas of planting the knight on d5. So for example, if I go knight f6 here, then after bishop to g5, e6, white can already go knight d5. And this is very annoying for black because obviously white is putting pressure on the pin. And if I go e takes d5 comes with check. This is just really bad for black because white's getting their piece back and the rook is open. My king is in the center. And yeah, white just has a huge advantage here. In fact, I discovered after the game that Pono had a game like this already back in 2012, where after knight d5, his opponent went h6. He took on f6, gf, queen f3. And yeah, white's position was just fantastic here with the two knights kind of dominating black's bishops and black having a very weak structure on the king side. So of course this was a simul, so I didn't have a lot of time to think here. Basically, I just had the time that it took Ruslan to go across the room. And I wasn't sure how to play here. I thought maybe I should start with e6, not to get pinned with bishop to g5. And here I was a little bit worried that white would just play knight d5 anyway. And I wasn't sure how to react to this because I don't want to take the knight. I think that would be bad for black. And then I also am not sure how to develop. Because if I go knight f6, I get hit with bishop to g5. If I go bishop e7, he can at least take the bishop on e7. And then I might have a weak d6 pawn in the future. After the game, he mentioned that maybe I should just go bishop d7 here, which the computer also suggests. And yeah, confirms his opinion that, in fact, white isn't doing so much here because now I am threatening to take on d5, and so the knight has to move. The knight doesn't have a good square, and I'm ready to just develop freely. So e6 is probably I think the safest move for black in the position. But after some thought, I decided to go g6. And here, yeah, my idea is very simple. I just want to develop bishop g7, knight to f6, and I thought this is quite reasonable. But I definitely underestimated my opponent's next move. So he thought here for a little bit and goes knight takes c6. And in general, he was definitely taking his time in the simul. So I remember he spent a little bit of time here, but then he banged down knight takes c6. And I realized that this was a problem because after rook takes c6, which I pretty much have to play, white now goes queen to d4, hitting the rook on h8. And the issue for black here is that if I play knight to f6, which is the most natural move, he can continue, for example, bishop g5, bishop g7, knight d5, putting pressure on the pin. And here after knight takes d5, queen takes g7 is just losing for black because two pieces are hanging. And if I try something like knight h5, well, white can just drop back like queen to d3, for example, and it's hard for me to castle because the e7 pawn is hanging. But I think white has better moves. Like I think queen b4 is stronger, just hitting b7 and e7 with a pretty nasty double attack. So on knight d5, I figured I would have to castle here. And yeah, then I was worried that white would go bishop takes f6. And I thought maybe I should go e takes f6 here, try to play f5. But white can just back up queen to d3. And this position didn't look very healthy for black at all, because if I go f5, white can take. The knight on d5 is really strong. If I take on b2, just rook to b1. And then white's taking on b7, and currently white's a pawn up. So extra pawn and good knight on d5 definitely, yeah, didn't seem like things are going my way. So yeah, I thought this position would be very unpleasant. But then after the game, he mentioned that, well, maybe I should just go bishop takes f6. So pretty much forcing knight takes f6, e takes f6. And I remember thinking during the simul that this position was much worse for black because my structure looks ugly. d6 is incredibly weak, backwards pawn. Of course, I've already doubled the kingside pawn, so f6 is also a weakness. And I just thought this position is much, much better for white, maybe like +1 or something in computer terms. I just thought white's going to triple up on the d file and go c4 and just completely paralyze my structure, get the bind going. And yeah, this just looked very, very unpleasant. But Pono actually thought black might be all right here. Maybe it's not that bad. And actually, the computer confirms this as well, and to my surprise, gave this position as equal. And if anything, it was saying that like maybe black is even a tiny bit better. like as I was making natural moves on the board, the eval started shifting slightly towards black side, which I still don't understand because I don't understand chess. But yeah, somehow the engine goes rook e8, rook e6 for black, then maybe the queen can come to e7 from there, and yeah, maybe it's not so easy for white to attack d6, and black has pressure against e4, black has pressure on the c file. If white ever pushes c4, then one day black can go b5. So yeah, apparently I completely underestimated black's position here. To me, it still looks like a very ugly structure, but clearly there's more at play. So not wanting to go into this ugly position, and from my point of view, I thought I would just be suffering there. I decided on queen d4 to go e5. And e5 is definitely not a move black wants to play either. I just thought it was the lesser of two evils. Now, why does black not want to play e5? Because I'm giving up the d5 square, d6 is now weak, and I've already played g6, right, to develop the bishop. So moving the e pawn after moving the g pawn, generally considered a big no-no. But yeah, I didn't want to go into that other position, and I felt like this was the only other choice because, of course, the rook on h8 is hanging. But after e5, queen d3, now, yeah, white is just strategically better due to the d5 square. So I go bishop e7, not knight f6, because then I think just bishop g5, white can trade this bishop for the knight and just get a very classic good knight against bad bishop scenario. I definitely didn't want that. So I start with bishop e7 here, not allowing white to develop with bishop to g5. White plays knight to d5, and here I went knight f6. So now my idea, of course, is I want to trade off white's very strong knight on d5. If knight takes f6, for example, bishop takes f6, I definitely thought black is worse here. I mean, I have the worst bishop, the worst structure, but I thought maybe this is still playable because I can play like queen d7, queen e6 in the future, castle, bring the rook to c8 eventually, and yeah, to me it looked like I'm worse, but at least it seems kind of holdable. I only have one real weakness to defend here, and I have a bishop that can always go to e7 to cover it if need be. And I wasn't sure what else white could do here. For example, if bishop h6, Well, my plan was knight to g4, which I don't think is very good, because white can just defend the bishop with like queen h3. And if I don't want to take on h6, because queen takes h6, and again, I have a really bad bishop against white's fantastic knight on d5. And if white goes, let's say, c4, I don't think I was planning to take right away. I think I was just going to castle here. It's important to point out that white doesn't have the move bishop g5 available because of knight takes d5, and then bishop e7, knight e7, so very typical tactic where black wins a piece. Yeah, otherwise, okay, bishop h6 can be played. I'll go rook e8. And I thought this is actually kind of, well, again, I think black is worse, but at least it didn't feel like I was losing or anything. At some point, maybe I'll take on d5, bring the queen to e6, and just kind of challenge white's space. Well, going back to my surprise here, Pono went for knight takes e7, which actually does make a lot of sense because here white still keeps an advantage, but I would say it's not as much as it seemed like it could be in other lines. After queen takes e7, white has, you know, nice dark square bishop here, but it also felt like, once again, I only have one weakness, and now I don't have this bad bishop on e7 to deal with. So here I feel like my position definitely comes to life. The engine was saying that white's best move here was knight to b4, which is kind of a surprising move, but it also makes some sense because white hits the rook on c6. I have to drop back with like rook to c8. And here white could start with bishop to g5 or play like c3, for example, castles, and then bishop to g5. And I'm not going to really want to let white take on f6, so I would have to play a move like maybe knight to d7 or knight h5. Then white can take on e7, queen takes e7, and white has managed to keep their knight on the board. The knight can come back to d5, and yeah, white just has a clear edge here. You know, it's not necessarily winning or anything, but of course black is certainly going to suffer in this position because white just strategically is better. So that was kind of an interesting moment. Instead, after knight e7, queen takes e7, the game saw c4. And yeah, I wasn't totally sure what to do here. I thought like maybe I should castle, but then on bishop to g5, I'd have to go queen to e6 to unpin. And what I didn't like about this is that I really wanted my knight on the e6 square because I wanted to go knight d7, knight c5, knight e6, but now this would cost me more time as my queen is in the way. I also thought if white just takes on f6 and plays the heavy piece position, then white just has kind of a long-term pull here because, again, the d6 pawn is just an easy target for white, and I didn't see my counterplay being so strong. Maybe this position is also okay for black. But in any case, I decided to start with knight to d7 because I thought this is more accurate because here I can play knight c5 and knight e6 in one go. I'm not letting white develop the bishop to g5, which is pretty active. And okay, I'm leaving my king in the center for one or two more moves, but the center is not that open. We've traded off a couple of pieces, and so it's not that dangerous for black's king. And here, if bishop h6, then I can just kick the bishop with queen h4, and there's no bishop g7 because rook g8, like the bishop is trapped. So knight d7, white played b3. I go knight c5, queen g3, and here I castled. I think maybe knight e6 was also possible, but I didn't want to deal with bishop h6 because now it's going to be hard to kick this bishop out. So I decide to castle here. This allows bishop h6, and yeah, black's dark squares definitely are weak, but it's not so easy for white to exploit them as we've traded off a couple of pieces, and my queen on e7 is well placed. At some moment, I can play f6 if I need to cover some more dark squares. The knight is coming to e6, and yeah, white is really far away from creating a serious attack. So bishop h6, I went rook fc8, basically announcing my intentions to try to play b5 here and fight for play on the c file. And yeah, now there's not so much that white can do here. I was thinking maybe he would go f4, but on f4, I think black has a couple of options. Number one, it can take. So if queen takes f4, knight to d3 picks up the exchange, so that's not really good for white. And if bishop takes f4, it's possible that I could take on e4. I didn't actually see how white could exploit this because next I can play f5 or rook e8 to support the knight, and I did win a pawn. So you know, white has to kind of prove their compensation here. I wasn't sure if I would go for this. I thought I could also consider knight d7, for example, and then just putting the knight on e5, where it has just a really nice outpost and it helps me cover d6. but yeah, I can also just ignore f4, I thought, and play a move like b5, where if white takes on e5, I'm just happy to take back, and I got the queenside counterplay going. e4 is a weakness here. And if f5, I thought this is maybe annoying, but I didn't quite see how I'm getting mated so soon, so I thought this would be risky for white as well, because I'm taking on c4 and creating a new weakness on the queen side. So f4 I thought maybe is the most aggressive approach, but also comes with some risk for white as well. Instead, white played rook a d1, and here I go knight e6, just improving the knight, covering g5, f4, looking to jump in with knight to d4. Pono went back, bishop to e3, and now I went b5. And yeah, here I definitely started feeling quite comfortable with my position, because I felt like everything is now well placed. Knight is well placed. I got b5 in. This is all, of course, the classic break against the Marazzi kind of structure, where if you get b5 in with black, typically you're doing fine, because you're fighting against the space. And now white took on b5. And okay, at this point, actually, for the last a couple moves already, it was kind of funny. The simul was taking a bit longer than people were expecting, and so the organizers, they started asking Pono to like speed up a bit, because they're worried. We were on a time crunch. There was a lunch buffet that was going to be ending soon, and yeah, there's other plans for the day. So okay, yeah, to Pono's credit, he started playing much faster. Of course, I think probably this meant that he had to take a lot of decisions quicker and couldn't play as accurately as he wanted to. But okay, well, sometimes simuls do be like that. So then on c takes b5, I decided to play e takes b5, and here I offered a draw, which was quickly accepted. In fact, he seemed a bit relieved that he could get rid of one of the games from the simul, because there's like 25 boards going. I wasn't the strongest player in the simul. There's actually a grandmaster playing as well. This kid from Israel, Yali Sokolovsky, who actually I played in Reykjavik. You guys can see that game on this channel. And I wasn't the first one to offer a draw either. First, Yali offered a draw with black. It was accepted. And then, normally I wouldn't offer a draw to such a strong opponent, especially not with black. It feels improper. Normally, I wouldn't even have played the simul, because I've always thought like title players are not really supposed to play simuls. Like we're supposed to like we're a little bit too strong, right? He has so many boards to deal with. It's kind of unfair. But he was a great sport about it. He didn't mind, and so that they wanted me to play, so I played. But yeah, and he seemed to be happy to take the draw so that he could focus on other games. And of course, I was happy to make the draw as well, because for me, this was already a great opportunity to play such a strong player. I feel like we had some interesting moments in this game. I definitely learned a little bit about this opening and what to do, what not to do. And yeah, that was that. Had the game continued, I was expecting something like rook to d5 here from white. But I thought black is already doing okay here. For instance, I could play rook to c2 and try to just take the a pawn. I could start with b4 as well, and then look for rook to c2. And yeah, in general, it seemed like black is fine here. And I think the engine is already giving pure zeros. So, seemed like a draw at this point was a normal result. So yeah, there you have it. It's definitely a huge opportunity for me to play against the former world champion, and yeah, I was very grateful to be able to get this game. Of course, it's not like it was serious full classical game. Obviously, it is a simul. It's just very different, very very different scenario. But anyway, still, it's nice to get a game against such an esteemed opponent. So yeah, that was that. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.